Hello and welcome back to my RC channel. I'm AndyRC and today I'm going to be revisiting again the Full Speed Leader 120. Now why am I revisiting it when I said in my last video that I was concluding the review and troubleshooting? So let me just back up there. So I reviewed this initially and I was having a problem with it. It was doing its flip of death, which is where the model's flying and then all of a sudden you put in a control and it would flip out and go crazy and crash. So I then did a video troubleshooting that. I did various things. I switched out the receiver for a 3-volt. I changed out the connector and also the wire going to the flight controller and the battery as well. And it would still do the issue. I would throttle up, do a maneuver, and it would flip and go crazy. So my conclusion was that these propellers here, they're drawing too many amps with this motor and ESC combination, and the flight controller's resetting, and you could actually see on the on-screen display the voltage drop down to like 5 volts when this is a 2S battery, so there's a huge amount of sag there. And when I switched the blades out to smaller blades, I was assuming they were drawing less amps and then the flip of death no longer occurred. The thing is though, I watched back my troubleshooting video and I wasn't happy with that conclusion. I am my own worst critic and I thought, no, there's something still not right there. The first clue for me was that I was mentioning that the flight controller is resetting in the air. The thing is, I've flown this battery down to the death, and what happens when the flight controller resets is you get the Beta Flight logo flash up because that has also reset, and that wasn't happening in the air. Okay, I could assume that maybe the ESCs are resetting, but then usually you get the tones going when they reset, and that wasn't happening either. So I was then thinking about what Lewis said from Full Speed. He said that if you reduce the digital idle to 3.7, that's the percentage of the idle, then the problem went away. Now, I couldn't see why that would be, and I tried it and it didn't work. And some people then said, well, if you increase it to about 5%, then that will sort the problem out. And I tried that and it didn't work either. But then on the second video, some people pointed me to Joshua Bardwell's live stream, which made sense of this idle changing thing. Lowering it does absolutely nothing, but increasing it, there is logic there for it, you see. And he said that when people get what they call ESC desyncs, there's all sorts of names for flip of death. Basically, it's just when your copter falls out of the sky. He said that he advises people to increase the digital idle speed, or if you're using one shot, then just the idle speed. Because what he's saying is when we do these flips, they happen so quickly. And the way that the copter does that is it slows down the motors, and if your idle speed is too low, then actually the motor can stop, and when it stops and these other ones are going, it'll just barrel roll and continue to flip out until the motor starts up again. And I thought, well, actually, what happened when I reduced the idle speed to 3.7 is it would never recover, and that's how I ended up crashing into a tree. And then when I increased it, it still did it, but it wasn't so bad. So then I thought, well, it doesn't really matter what we increase the idle speed to, as long as it's not taking off when I arm. So I raised the idle speed to 10, which sounds too much. And at that point, the copter's sort of bouncing on the ground, but it will still descend. I went and flew it, and flip of death, completely gone. So I have to say, I was wrong. Yeah, the things that I did in that video, they are probably going to be valid because, you know, flip of death, it's not just this. You can't just say all of the time that if you're having problems with flips of death, that it's the idle speed, because there are cases of where, you know, it's drawing too many amps and you've got incorrect components and the connector's not big enough and the ESCs are resetting, etc. But I've flown this 5 times now with the idle speed at 10 and it no longer does it. So I guess the thinking is that if you put these big props on, they're heavier, right? So it's going to take more oomph to get them going. So actually reducing the startup power to try and fix this problem actually is no good. You have to increase it. So I've kept it stock at 0.5 here, but decreasing it, yeah, you're going to cause the issue even more, because then your motor can stop even easier. Yeah, so what has worked for me in this particular situation is having the motor startup power at 0.5 and then increasing the digital idle speed to 10, and no more flips of death, can use these props, and this is now one of my favorite models. One thing I will say though is I have changed a lot. So I don't know whether this has helped. It certainly helped when I put this receiver in, it was doing it much less. And of course I've changed the connector. So for me, if you want to get this model, and it's a really great model, but it's been a pain to troubleshoot all this, I would say 3-volt receiver, XT30 connector really should be standard if we're running on-screen display and huge props anyway, so I'm glad that I changed that out. And then digital idle speed up so that when we do these crazy flips, the motors don't stop. And if you watch the flight that I did, one of the flights, because I've done a few, it doesn't seem to be drawing as many amps as well. So I don't know whether that's a thing, like if you have your idle speed too low, then it needs a boost in amps to get the motors spooling back up, whereas if they're already spooled up, then it draws less amps. That's something that I notice as well, but who knows? It's worked, and I'm really pleased, and I hope that it's going to help you out. And also thanks to the people that pointed me to Joshua, and a thank you for Joshua for being the absolute oracle of this hobby. I'm going to leave you with some flying, and as always, thanks so much for watching. Please continue to subscribe. Cheers.